Chair lays out House Bill 1186 and recognizes Chairman Chia to explain this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Do you all have any disinfectant for the microphone? Do you have any? Yeah, thanks. Right. Sure.
There's a tissue right there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Wipe this clean. Thank you, members. I appreciate you allowing me to bring this bill, and I was so happy to go after Chairman Cyrier because I think he managed to piss everybody off on all sides. And testifying against this bill, I promise to do so maybe with only one. I wanted to bring this bill before you, and I was glad to hear a lot of the testimony because I want to remove the monuments to the original cancel culture. The folks that wanted to cancel the United States, they wanted to cancel the Union, and they wanted to cancel Black lives. So our Texas Capitol is an opportunity to have visitors come from around the world. And not only do we witness bills becoming laws and experiences being shared by countless Texans, we're all trying to make a positive change in our state. And history is written in these laws, all around us. And recently, you'll remember, members, if you've served here a minute, that we were able to remove a lie that sat in our Capitol that was put up by the Daughters of the Confederacy, related to the Confederacy's creed, just not too long ago, and it was a relic of Jim Crow. In this state, we removed a number of these monuments to a lie. And the reason I call it a lie, and I was happy to hear my friend and colleague, Travis Clardy, Representative Clardy, discussing this, is because it really wasn't reflective of a kumbaya moment after the Civil War where people made amends, because black people were never at the table. They just weren't part of it. It might have been the North and the South, it might have been politicians, but there was a complete erasure and cancellation of black lives and black experience post-Reconstruction. And that's when a lot of these things went out. And it's just not the offense that we might take to monuments during Jim Crow, which I'm totally on board with you there. That was designed to perpetuate making illegal of black lives. But that also was happening after Reconstruction. Reconstruction was 14 years here in Texas, ended in 1899, and these monuments were going up in 1901, 1902, 1903, 1910. A direct reaction to Reconstruction. In fact, if you go to the north entrance, you can see the black members of the legislature that served after Reconstruction. And we can't even find an accurate list of them. There are all kinds of holes in that little composite because they were so soundly erased that we can't even find pictures of those black state legislators. They were burned, they were discarded, they were erased from history. And so that's why I think that we need to remove these lies from the Capitol grounds. And I want to make a sort of distinction of the monuments that we have, whether it's the monument to World War II veterans, the monument to frontier women, the Rose Garden that we have celebrating the Tyler Rose, the June 19th monument, from the Confederate monuments that glorify Jeff Davis, who was responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of American soldiers. As Commissioner Patterson correctly pointed out, yep, he was the guy who sent people to war. He said, don't blame the soldiers, blame the guys at the top. Well, that's Jeff Davis, and he holds the highest honor on our Capitol grounds as being the highest figure in all of the statuary. He's highest up, not a Texan. But he wanted to cancel the United States. He wanted to cancel U.S. soldiers. He ordered hundreds of thousands of Americans to die. I really do believe that these Confederate artifacts are a symbology of hate, racism, and oppression. No, they don't glorify the soldiers, because if they would, they'd glorify the Union soldiers that died in the conflict. About 3,000 Union soldiers died during the Civil War. You know where they are here on the Capitol grounds? Nowhere. Zero. George Washington on the Capitol grounds? Nope, but we got Jeff Davis. So all this statuary to the Confederacy is inherently a lie, because it's just one side of the story. There's no Union discussion. There's no context for any of this. My bill says, let's remove it. If you want to study that history, let's put it in the Bullock Museum. Put it in a Confederate cemetery. Put it in a place that has context. When we did the Juneteenth memorial, we had people on that commission who were historians that could offer the proper context. When we had people who did the Mexican-American, the Tejano Monument, they were historians. And there was a grand coalition of people that represented all corners of the state that put that thing up. These Confederate monuments, they wanted to tell people like you, Representative Gervin Hawkins, you need to stay in your place. And they stay up because they're a symbol that people need to stay in their place. It's exactly what they are. My bill also says that in addition to taking down these monuments, and again, what the State Preservation Board, that is composed of a lot of our statewide elected officials, what they do with them is fine. They can put them in a museum, they can melt them down, they can put them in a Confederate cemetery, whatever they want. I'm just saying, in a place where we're going to celebrate all Texans, we're not going to have monuments to this cancel culture, monuments to this lie, monuments to people who weren't even from Texas that sent hundreds of thousands of people to death. That's just not going to happen here. We're state's better than that. And these monuments also include removing names. Like the name that we have on the John H. Reagan building, that when we go there to do our committee hearings, many of us don't know who he is. He was born in Tennessee, and he served in the cabinet of Jeff Davis. He was Postmaster General and later Secretary of the Treasury. And in his speech about slaves, he said they do not recognize and consider in their speeches the fact that, referring to actually a congressional debate, speaking of his colleagues, they don't recognize and consider in their speeches that there are 4 million of these Negroes that are incapable of self-government. And that to invest them with freedom would necessarily lead to the extermination of a greater part of them. For the safety, individuals that fought to resist the political rights of African Americans, who took arms against the Unions, who killed fellow Americans, to maintain the institution of slavery. He says it himself. That's what it was about. And when these things were going up, context is also important, because you had black people who were speaking up. Opposition to the Confederacy and these Confederate monuments came from none other than Frederick Douglass, who spoke repeatedly against these monuments, calling them a needless record of stupidity and wrong. He went on to say in 1870 that monuments to the lost cause will prove to be monuments of folly and will only provoke memories of this wicked rebellion. In 1931, civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois commented that Confederate statues were, quote, sacred to the memory of those who fought to perpetuate human slavery. Human slavery, members, is one human owning another human. That's chattel. As Representative Johnson said today in our press conference, his great-great-great-grandfather raped his great-great-great-grandmother because he owned her. And he could. And that was not an isolated incident. That happened in the Confederacy repeatedly and regularly in a regime of slave ownership and cancellation of black lives. So members, the one wrinkle on this, and in addition to removing the Confederate monuments, is that we rename the Reagan building. And I have suggested in here, but I'm open to other suggestions. I have a suggestion to glorify people who were in resistance to this regime that sought to criminalize black lives, sought to own black people as chattel. People who risked their lives to save others. People who stood up to the Confederacy and the institutions of slavery. And I want to name it after Nathaniel Jackson and John Ferdinand Weber, who, while maybe not known in popular history, served the same purpose as Harriet Tubman did with the Underground Railroad to the north. See, these abolitionists set up an Underground Railroad to the south, because Mexico, far in advance of the United States, had already outlawed slavery. And they also did not sign any extradition treaties with the slave hunters in the United States. They were not required to return slaves. They would not sign those treaties. And so an Underground Railroad was developed to the south, where between 5,000 to 10,000 slaves successfully escaped to Mexico. And it is that resistance that we should be celebrating. Because you know what? If Mr. Weber and Mr. Jackson had been caught, they would have been killed immediately. And that's real courage. That's what we should be celebrating on the Capitol grounds. That resistance to an immoral and unjust treason and sedition that existed in the Confederacy. And so, members, I appreciate you letting me lay out this bill. I know we're going to have a lot of hot sports opinions coming up. I'm also happy to debate and discuss on the House floor, members. And I welcome your assistance with this. If you have other ideas about how we rename the Reagan building, I'm happy to entertain those. But it should be after people who engaged in resistance against this immoral Confederacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, the questions of the chairman. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Brother Anchia, it's great to have you here. You know, you and I have a history now. I think in many occasions, we have respectfully agreed to disagree. And I think we find ourselves
maybe once or twice.
Crossroads.
Maybe once or twice.
Several times we have agreed. And I've always appreciated your ability to bring ideas and be very thoughtful and challenge us all to rethink our positions on things. And you've done that here again today in a very civil and respectful tone. And I hope the witnesses will come after will echo that sentiment and your ability to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Clardy. And I don't mean to cut you off there, but I too respect you and your position, your knowledge of history as well. I spent a lot of time on this. And I apologize if I brought a lot of passion to it, as sometimes I'm guilty of doing. But I hope you know it comes from a good place.
Well, and I know respect nothing less, and I hope you feel that feeling is reciprocated. You know, I was reminded as you spoke of probably one of my favorite quotes in Texas history. When the secession delegation met in 1861 in Texas, and Sam Houston had fought against secession, and one of the very few, I think only 9 members of the Texas legislature voted against secession. There was one, J.W. Throckmorton, and when he rose to speak against secession, the gallery erupted, and they were yelling and booing and hissing and throwing things. And J.W. Throckmorton said, when the rabble hiss, well may patriots tremble. And he said that at a difficult moment, speaking against the tide of history at that moment, but in hindsight, he was proven to be correct. What we don't have, as we sit here today, is that crystal ball that allows us to see how will this be viewed, the decisions we make relative to our monuments and our history, and how we preserve it, or how we neglect it, or how we destroy it. How that will be viewed in 150 years. And I think this is a very weighty subject for us to address. I do fear, though, that when I see statues of people, of figures, not just relative to the war between the states, but whether it be Columbus or something that's the 54th Massachusetts Regiment being destroyed or being painted or being defaced, I have a hard time taking seriously anybody's historical knowledge that pulls down a bronze statue and then chooses to kick it wearing flip-flops or tennis shoes. I don't find those people to be particularly intelligent on its face. But to me, the rabble is hissing, and they're hissing louder and clearer with each day of cancel culture as it's grown. Not in some studious well thought and reasoned approach, which is principled. And again, I can see where it's coming from, but it's the lack of predicate, the lack of education, the lack of respect for other people's views. I don't know, Rolf, if you were in here a moment ago, we're not entitled, in the law we say this all the time, we're not entitled to our own facts. The facts are what the facts are. But I do think different segments of our culture are entitled to our own history. And so you mentioned our friends in the African American caucus and the importance of some of the monuments we've built here and some of the things that have been developed. And I think it is important for that history to be respected. You name those individuals developed a different Underground Railroad. That is important history. I think it's important that we have Black History Month. I think it's important that we study these heroes under different circumstances. And that history should be respected, and it means a lot. But we can go around this room and pick out different ethnicities and different histories. I think it was last session we passed a resolution honoring the Armenians that were slaughtered by the Turks, one of the first acts of genocide in the modern world. And those people that are of Armenian descent, that means a lot to them, and that is their history, and that is their heritage. I would just posit to you that there are folks like me, and I don't doubt for a second that I don't have family and heritage that wore the blue and fought on the other side, or that we had family members in the Revolution or in War of 1812 or World War I or World War II. But all of that is part of our individual history, and I think more importantly, our collective history. It doesn't take, you can't build a tapestry this nation represents with just a few threads. And some of them may seem oddly colored, or a little strange or whatever, but woven together they weave a beautiful story. And we can't start picking out the threads we don't like, or the whole thing comes unraveled. So again, I know your approach is very thoughtful and well-intentioned way, but I really am troubled by some of the rabble hissing and the demonization and the ridicule or the scorn and the invective that's visited upon people whose heritage I have invested and others have invested, and make them out to be something less than human, not perfect, but that they had virtue and that they were honorable and they fought for home and for hearth and the things they held dear and held to the faith as best they believed it, not perfectly, but honorably and passionately and with temerity and with unbelievable fortitude. And I think that's borne out in all the histories we read and we try to contemplate, which I think we should know better to bring forward so those mistakes of the past aren't repeated in the future. So there's not a question in there anywhere.
If I can respond to
I wanted to say
this
that and let you know that's where my head's at and where I'm coming from. I'll be happy to, if the chairman will indulge us, to hear your response.
I know the chairman wants to keep us on time. I would just respond that I think we may be in violent agreement that there has to be an objective standard for how we look at these. And I look at the monuments to Korean War dead, World War II dead, World War I very differently than I look at this one-sided, limited, inaccurate monument. Because it's not about Civil War dead. This is just about the Confederacy. That's all it is. If it were truly a monument to Civil War dead, it would be inclusive. And it would also be contextual. And none of that is there. We have a rebel flag carved into the side. We have the leader of the Confederacy, not a Texan, never a Texan, right? Who ordered people to go to war, kill their fellow Americans. I think there's a problem there. I really, really do. And I think it would be appropriate to put that in a museum with context about it. Absolutely. But to receive the honor of the glory of the Capitol grounds, I think is a different matter altogether. And I will tell you, that hissing rabble, I agree with you. I don't want them tearing down statues, defacing Columbus or anything else. But if we don't apply some historical context, if we're not inclusive in the way we glorify people on this Capitol ground, the hissing rabble, they're going to act on one side or the other.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
if I may, as much as I'd love to hear you and Representative Carding debate, You have approximately 30 witnesses to testify on this bill, and they all have 3 minutes apiece. Representative Carty, you're going to have multiple opportunities to express your view. I promise you, but could we please move on?
Just one comment.
No, because then the chairman will need to comment.
Mr. Chairman.
Please address the chairman when he closes after you've heard the testimony.
Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely right, and I will stand down and I respectfully request the opportunity to close because I know no such right exists. Thank you.
You are going to get that opportunity, and Representative Carty's going to get the opportunity to take you to task after we've heard the testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Our next witness is Tammy Hurley. Thank you, Ms. Hurley, for being here. Please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Thank you. I'm Tammy Hurley. I'm from Tyler, Texas, and I am against House Bill 1186. And I am representing myself, as well as also the Texas Division of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. As a voter in many elections at the local, the state, and the national levels, the voice of Texans is truly important, and I'm glad that I'm able to be here to be able to give that opinion. Whenever I've had an opportunity to travel throughout my life, I have been amazed whenever I go somewhere and somebody says, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Texas." That immediately starts questions. "Tell me about Texas." Of course, what do they say? "Do you have a cow or a longhorn in your backyard?" No, I have a lot of roses since I'm from Tyler. But no cows or longhorns in my backyard. But the stories about Texas they want to hear. They want to hear about our culture. And in fact, it was kind of funny. Today, here in the Capitol complex, I was out in front of one of the elevators and there was these 3 men. And I said, "Hey, have y'all enjoyed your visit to the Capitol?" Because I could tell they were here kind of in a tourist mode. And they were like, "Yes, we're here on a bachelor party. We're here from New Jersey." And I said, "Well, tell me what made you want to come to the Capitol and what came to Texas." Texas loves everything. And we love everything about Texas. Everything you do in Texas is big and grand. And I was like, they've been here for a couple of days and they get it. They get it. I thought that was awesome. So I wanted to tell you that little anecdote. But you know, they wanted to hear the stories about Texas. They were looking, they were asking questions about where to find different things. They had a scavenger hunt.
Ms. Hurley, do you have any issues related to the bill specifically?
I do. I'm getting there.
Your time is running out.
Okay, I'll get there. All right. I do think that we need to be careful that we make sure that, because this seems to be, this bill seems to be aimed at one particular piece of history, Confederate history. If we, as Texas was under 6 flags, not 1, not 2, but all 6, and this includes our Confederate history, if we scrub this, we lose part of Texas's identity. The portrait of Albert Sidney Johnson, he fought under 3 Texas flags. The Texas flag, the United States flag, and yes, the Confederate flags. We have monuments that are on the Capitol grounds that were sculpted by Pompeo Capini. We heard today about Italian Americans, how they're going to hopefully be honored through a bill. He was an Italian who helped to build something to make it beautiful on our Capitol grounds. Hood's Texas Brigade Monument was actually, they said the Hood's Texas Brigade, which were fighting Texas boys, were the best material on the continent. Cannons, the Confederate soldiers, those are monuments that help adorn the property, giving Texas sculptures, artwork, and displays that are worthy of Texas's proud history and show a piece of Texas's culture around our great state capital. This bill also does have a negative financial impact on 2 layers. One, over $300,000 have been said that it will cost to remove these monuments, and I do think that Texas has a better way to be spending $300,000 than to be removing these monuments.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Testify. Members, any questions for Ms. Hurley? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Tammy, thanks for being here. I was born in Tyler, so I love Tyler. Love that place. I share your love and passion for Texas. So does it resonate at all when Representative Anchia says the highest point of honor that we give on these Texas grounds is to somebody who's not a Texan? And I'm a Republican. Lincoln was the first Republican president, fought for the Union, won that war to preserve the Union. So for me, and I don't know for you, is there something about that resonates that, like you said, 6 Flags of Texas, that's historical. We had 6 flags fly over. But when we're giving a place of honor to someone that's not even a Texan, when we're Texans and we want to show ourselves, do you think we ought to do something that highlights Texan contributions more than maybe a non-Texan?
Well, I kind of, thank you for that question, Representative Krause. That question, I think, is a little bit hard for me to answer because I wasn't a part of the teams that were putting the other monuments here on the Texas grounds, on the Texas Capitol grounds, whether it be the Pioneer Woman Monument, whether it be the African American Monument, Tohono monuments. They were all sculptured and manufactured via different means. Could they have been taller? I don't know. Was there a limit on the height? I don't know. So that's a little bit of a hard question for me to ask, or for me to be able to answer for you, because they could have been made at something to be more commensurate at that time.
It's a fair response.
Any other member question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, ma'am. Brandon Bernhardt, our next witness. Thank you, Brandon, again for being here. You know the drill. Your name, you represent, and your position on the bill.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Brandon Burkhart. Represent This is Texas Freedom Force, and we are completely opposed to this bill. History comes alive when someone is able to not only read about the past, but is also able to visit the places, examine the artifacts, touch it, appreciate it, and just basically visit the monuments and study the actual words of the monuments of those that men that have came before us. This bill does nothing more than an effort to try to erase history. And it also emboldens the cancel culture. And I heard the representative say, well, let's take the Confederate monuments and let's put it into a cemetery. Well, that's not what the cancel culture wants. And we've got proof of that. Dallas, the Confederate War Memorial, which actually sits in Pioneer Park, and it's a cemetery. They wanted to remove that one and get rid of that, even though it's set in the cemetery. So it's just a domino effect of going down the line of removing it. Our organization has stood and physically, and I do mean physically, defended more monuments in this state than any other organization out there. We've defended the Alamo last year. 150 men armed went up against 4,000 to 5,000 rioters and looters, and yes, I call them rioters because they tore up downtown. They messed up downtown San Antonio. Removing this stuff, these monuments, is just, it's egregious. I mean, it's the only way to put it. I know that he also, the representative said something about that, he said that it's not about the Confederate dead, it's about the Confederacy, which is an absolute lie. Travis Park Monument in San Antonio, Texas stated, "Least we forget our Confederate dead," with a generic soldier on top, not honoring any specific soldier of any type. What did the city of San Antonio do? Removed it in the cover of darkness. Another thing was to mention, it said something about Texans being part of the Confederacy. Well, Robert E. Lee's quote was that the enemy never sees the back of my Texans. That's because Texans know how to fight. We could go on, but this is just nothing more than an attempt to try to rewrite history and erase history. I'm all for all history, and just as we have defended the Confederate monuments and the Alamo and others, we defended the MLK monument in Houston. After it was vandalized, our guys sat there for 2 nights, 48 hours, armed around that monument to protect it from any type of vandalism. So it's not about the Confederacy, it's about our history, and we have to learn from history. And just like our shirts say on the back of it, those that do not know history are doomed to try to delete it. And that's exactly what we're saying. It moves on from the Confederacy to Pepe Le Pew. I mean, now it's Dr. Seuss and so on and so forth. This won't end if we continue to embolden these people. So we've got to put a stop to this. Stop erasing our history, especially Texas, which is so rich in history. You know, we learned what we're supposed to champion from our history, and we learned what we're supposed to avoid from that.
Perfect timing, Mr. Bernhardt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No questions?
Any questions?
No.
All right, thank you. Our next witness is Ramon Garza. Mr. Garza? And again, folks in the audience, as witnesses, as you testify, speak towards the bill so we can hear your ideas towards the action we're taking today. And with that, Mr. Garza, state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, Barbara Gergen Hoppins, San Antonio. Committee members, my name is Ramon Garza. and I'm the outreach director of this Texas Freedom Force, and I represent many Texans of our members that are not here, and we are against HB1186. Now, oh wow, I made a lot of notes. With all due respect to State Representative Chia here, to me, what I've been hearing for the last two bills, but we'll talk about this one right now, is that the word Confederate is a bad word here. They're using it as a four-letter word. Now, what I come to, I just cannot fathom that they want to change history. They want to change history with this bill. Now, earlier this evening, we heard one of the supporters saying about General Albert Sidney Johnson. Yes, he was a general in the Confederate Army. He was a general in the United States Army. And he was also a general in the Texan Army. Why are we going to try to take that portrait down? Why? That is part of Texas history. The other thing regarding the Confederates that I really want to touch, because it hits real hard. Haven't we forgotten the Confederates also had a black battalion? There were black soldiers that fought on the Confederate side. Are they bad people as well? Are we to punish them too? Their families? Heck, we got a state representative here in the state of Texas whose great-great-great-grandfather fought on the Confederate side, who is a black gentleman. He made that statement the last legislation. He made that argument. There should not be nothing wrong with the Confederate side. We even have Hispanics and Mexicans that fall on the Confederate side also. Are we to condemn them as well? Just because the word Confederate is in their first name, they fall on that side. They weren't slaves. My family is Lipan Apache. If you want to talk about slavery, yes, there was slavery in Mexico, and they took them as slaves as well too. But we don't talk about that, do we? No. The Confederate statement, the word, the statutes, everything should just stay in place. I don't believe in changing it, and many folks feel the same way as I do. And the fact is, renaming the Reagan building also needs to stay in place. Don't change nothing. Don't change the doggone thing, in my opinion. Yes, you stated that we should put a monument of Washington on the Capitol. If you wish, do so. Who's stopping you? The folks here? I don't know. But taking down a monument, Bishop says Confederate, costs money to put another one up. Folks believe on both sides of our history. Texas history is not the prettiest thing.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks for traveling from San Antonio.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Our next witness, unless anybody had any questions for Mr. Garza? No. Okay. Our next witness is Tracy Kelly. Tracy, as you come forward, as you know the drill, state your name.
Yeah, and I'll be quick.
Who you represent and your position on the bill.
Yes, ma'am. Tracy Kelly. I represent myself, and I'm also a member of Texas Freedom Force. And I am strongly against this bill. And that's what I want to say. I just want to
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for your time. Glad you're here.
Chair calls Michael Hurley. Then we're going to have Joanne Henry, then John McCammon. Mr. Hurley.
He's just outside. Let me go.
I'm ready. Joanne Henry, I'm ready.
Let's have Joanne Henry.
I'm not going to ditto this time.
Okay.
I think I know the drill.
For the record.
Joanne Henry, this is Texas Freedom Force. I'm talking for myself and them, whatever.
And you are on for or against this bill?
I'm against.
Please proceed.
This bill is his opinion, not everybody's opinion, and I guess that's how bills are. But you can't change history by removing history. And one other thing, Representative Hawkins, he mentioned you said people like you stay in your place, I'd be offended by that. You cannot get that from a statute unless you want to get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? No. All right. Is Michael Hurley with us now?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hurley, for the record, please state your name and who you represent and your position on, for, or against this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being patient with me. I had a Zoom call, the only one today at 6 o'clock. What are the odds? So I appreciate it. I do thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Michael Hurley. I'm from the beautiful Rose City of Tyler, Texas. Yes, I said it again. I'm very proud of Tyler. And I am the lieutenant commander, or one of the lieutenant commanders, representing the 86 camps that make up the Texas Division, Sons of Confederate Veterans. And I bring you greetings on behalf of each of those 86 camps. I'm also speaking as an individual. I think it's important for you to know that no one individual in the Sons of Confederate Veterans speaks for all. I'm simply speaking as a member of the SCV and as a concerned citizen. As I am a part of the posterity, the brave Confederate soldier, I am very firmly against House Bill 1186. I want to put you in brief context with what was occurring in 1860. Please remember that our government was not run in the same fashion that it is today. And at this time, this wonderful experiment called Democratic Republican form of government was very much in flux. And the main question was, would the state government be the supreme authority over its citizens? Or would the larger federal government in Washington, D.C. be the supreme authority over its citizens? I remind you that as a result of their right granted by the Constitution of the United States, the people of Texas voted overwhelmingly in 1860 to exercise their right granted to them by the Constitution of the federal government at that time to leave a union that they were not bound to stay in. So they committed nothing illegal. In fact, the overwhelming majority of Texans voted to do just such. I always get tickled when I hear the speech of Abraham Lincoln, who later said at Gettysburg, "Government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth." But if you are Texas and you vote overwhelmingly, the people spoke, you're invaded, and your homes and lives and treasure are threatened. In 1860, there was a little more than 420,000 population in Texas, and yet over 90,000 able-bodied men, almost 1/4 of the entire population of the state of Texas, answered the call of the then state government's call to arms. I remind you, they answered the call of men who sat in very similar, or perhaps for some of you, the very same chairs which you represent today. That state government, believing it was supreme over that of the federal government, and the people of Texas having voted overwhelmingly democratically to leave such union. Although the stakes were great, the men of Texas, more than 90,000 of them, flocked to that banner. The memorials that exist on our wonderful and beautiful Texas Capitol, in all respect with the representative that introduced the bill, it is impossible to separate those monuments from the fact that they are memorials. They are memorials. They stand for many things, but one is a memorial to the brave Texans who never returned home.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Members, are there questions for this witness? Seeing none? Mr. Hurley, thank you for being here.
Thank you for your patience.
Chair calls John McMahon. Next, after that, we'll have Shelby Little and then Randy Beal. Please be ready.
Who got you?
Mr. McMahon, please state your name, who you represent, and your position on, for, or against this bill.
My name is John McCammon. I'm from Bernie, Texas. I represent myself, and I want to address this bill and the fact that several comments have been made about statues to people here in the Capitol.
Sir, were you against the bill? I need you to state if you're on, for, or against.
I am against removing any
Are you?
monuments.
Are you against House Bill 1186?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Please proceed.
So, do I start now?
Yep, ready to go.
Okay. I would like to address the fact that not only the person that introduced this, but one of the members of this committee here stated that one of the monuments or one of the statues or one of the pictures were to someone not from the state of Texas. And with the way things are going these days, it certainly appears that the beautiful painting, which could be removed with bills just like this, of Davy Crockett would be removed, because Davy Crockett was from Tennessee. And that is just an example of where we're going with these types of bills. The other thing is I'm a United States Army veteran, 1st Squadron, 4th Cav, 1st Infantry Division, service from 1972 to 1974. My ancestors fought for the Confederacy. And this information that I passed to you lists all of the generals that fought for the United States of America. And in the future, are we to cancel them? Are we to not include them in any monuments, portraits, being a member of the state legislature because their ancestors were Confederates? I hope not. Gentlemen, this bill is mean-spirited and speaks to the division that we see in the country today. I hope that you will consider not accepting a hard-hearted and vicious piece of legislation. That's it.
Thank you. Members, questions of the witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here in testimony. Chair call Shelby Little. Mr. Little, for the record, please state your name, who you represent, your position on the bill, on, for, or against.
Thanks, Chairman King, members. My name is Shelby K. Little, and I represent myself and the 6th Brigade, Texas Division, Sons of Confederate Veterans. And I am against the bill.
Thank you.
I'm a resident of Williamson County, the final resting place for over 1,000 Confederate veterans, a small part of the tens of thousands of Confederate heroes buried across our great state. Tens of thousands more lie in faraway battlefields, from Arizona to Pennsylvania, or in mass graves of Union prison camps. Many Texans have forgotten these great men. Others, like the supporters of this bill, have never known them. They were heroes then, and they were heroes now. The bill we are discussing today dishonors these men and holds their courage, sacrifice, and accomplishments as nothing. This bill is without merit and should be recognized as such. Ladies and gentlemen, I spent 30 years in the military forces of Texas and the United States, and am proud to do so. Not everyone is a hero. Good guys, bad guys, the innocent, all get killed in war. But there's a big difference between dying with your face to the foe and getting shot in the back by your own people. In essence, that's what the supporters of this bill are trying to do. It must not succeed. I implore you to reject this divisive and totally unnecessary bill. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter.
Thank you very much. Members, questions of the witness? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for your testimony. Chair calls Randy Beal. Next will be Lamar Henry, and after that, Christopher Henry. Mr. Beal, for the record, please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, on, for, or against.
My name is Randy Beal. I speak for This is Texas Freedom Force, which I'm the director, and for myself, and I am against this bill.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Couple of reasons. A, old adage is, once you give somebody an inch, they'll take a mile. Since I've been involved in this, that's true. We have fought these people for 3.5 to 4 years. I've had my life threatened by these people because they get this and then they get this and they get this. If you get a camel's nose underneath the tent, pretty soon you're going to have a camel walking around inside. So to combat it, if they are so adamant about taking these monuments down that have been up for multiple years, for whatever reason, whatever history it is, go put some up yourself. Raise some money, find a cause, and go put a monument up. They spent, I don't know how much taxpayer dollars to put Black Lives Matter in front of Yates High School in Houston, Texas. I don't have a problem with that. Do I have a problem with the city of Houston furnishing people to do that? Yes, I do. Do I have a problem with people I know going down there to volunteer with it and they wouldn't let them because they were white? Yes, I do. So go put up your monuments, and you know what? When somebody attacks those, me and my group will go stand there and defend that monument. I have spent more nights at monuments than I care to even count. And we were at the BLK monument in Houston, Texas, in Herman Park that night. I've spent the night at many, many monuments. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Bill. Members, questions of Mr. Bill? Seeing none, we appreciate your testimony. Thanks for being here. Chair calls Lamar Henry. Mr. Henry, for the record, please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, on, for, or against.
My name is Lamar Henry. I'm speaking for myself and as Vice President of this Texas Freedom Force, and I oppose this bill in the most strongest way. I don't have to use 90,000 words to get my point across. I'll just be kind of short about it. There are so many things wrong with this bill. I don't believe I've ever seen anything like this, ever. This is a bigoted and racist attempt to censor history, calling for actions one would attribute to ISIS or the former Soviet Union or the Nazis when they were burning books. These monuments, portraits, buildings, etc., whatever they are, some are Texas treasures and all are historical parts of the past, for good or bad. Some of it's bad, some of it's good. It is history. These buildings and plaques and all are not racist. This racist attitude is in the minds of these few people who see it that way. There's nothing racist about those monuments standing out there at all. It's these racist people that want to tear them down. Those are the real racists. This excuse for a bill is an insult to the citizens of Texas and should not be given the least bit of credibility.
Thank you. Members, questions for Mr. Henry? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Chair calls Christopher Henry. Mr. Henry, for the record, please state your name, who you represent, and your position on, for, or against it.
My name is Chris Henry. I'm a member of this is Texas Freedom Force, and I am against this bill 1186. Most of my notes that I wrote down have already been stated. One thing that is included that I haven't heard anything about is the Texas Rangers Monument. I don't know how, Texas Rangers, I understand this come up lately. There's some bad things have happened, but it's still our history. As with every other thing, you have to know the history to be able to move forward from it. And, the Texas Rangers are no different than any other organization. With that being said, I'm against this. I don't believe that, along with the other monuments, pictures, plaques, should be removed. To me, it's just erasing history.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Thank you.
Members, questions of this witness? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Chair calls Elizar Cisneros. I think they must have, we had this witness earlier, and this witness was down twice. So we're going to show the witness as registering against and not testifying. Chair now calls Rick Briscoe. Then it'll be Lee White, then Jeffrey Moss. Mr. Briscoe, for the record, please state your name, who you represent, your position on the bill, on, for, or against.
Mr. Chairman and members, I am Rick Briscoe, speaking on my own behalf in opposition to the bill. To be brief and avoid as much as possible.
You're in opposition of the bill, Mr. Briscoe?
Yes, sir.
We are showing you as for. Do we have your permission to change your testimony to against?
Please do so, sir.
Thank you. Please proceed.
I'll try to avoid overlap as much as possible, but we're facing a continuing effort at erasing history, rewriting it, and we certainly should endeavor to place history in context. There's been a lot said about the so-called Civil War. There was nothing civil about it. Historians tell us that the United States of America was only referred to in the singular after the Civil War. And we should put in context the way that people lived and thought about our Union at that time. Because a little east of Texas, but in Virginia, Robert E. Lee was offered command of the Union Army and declined it because he could not draw his sword against his native Virginia. When the war was over, to show the complexity of the man, a freedman, a recently freed slave, was taking communion in his church and no one would go up beside him. So Lee did. We really could stand to place our history in context. In San Antonio, Unionists were lynched. I should hope we will never again face such similar circumstances. And the monuments are not to necessarily take sides on whether secession was or was not legal. I've personally said it was settled by force of arms a long time ago in discussion. But I would, for example, favor placing additional materials out by the monuments on the Capitol grounds to help place things in context. Because if nothing else, a lot of Texans died in that war, and we hope that we should have learned something from it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Briscoe. Members, questions for the witness? Seeing none, we thank you for being here. Chair calls Lee White, Lee White. Yes.